for all coming out today. Some of you know that the governor, Gavin Newsom, has set a goal of 3.5 million housing units by 2025. So for those of you developers and builders here in the room, that is an audacious goal, but many people are optimistic if we all work together, come to the table, figure out how to communicate, collaborate, and compromise to make this happen. As Noah said, this is our last city on our 10-city tour. We have been doing 2 cities a day for the last 2 weeks almost, and we're very excited that San Jose, there's a great turnout here today on a Friday, and so we look forward to hearing from all of you. So today we have a conversation starter. We just started on January 7th. This is my second time going around the state listening to stakeholders. So the first time was in January, and just getting a general sense of how are people feeling out there? What are their needs? What are people concerned about? And this time is a little bit more focused, but we're still open because we want to hear from all of you here today. But we also have a conversation starter about proposed changes to our CDLAC and TCAC regulations. This PowerPoint is on our website at the Treasurer's Office, either on TCAC or CDLAC. Nothing is set in stone, right? So you being here is really listening, giving us input, and we will talk about the process in a little bit. So if anybody wants to speak, please submit a speaker's card here. We're going to have Jovan, my deputy overseeing housing and economic development, open it up for us, and he's been doing a yeoman's job basically as the acting director for both TCAC and CDLAC. And then we will have our team, Stan and Evan, talk a little bit about, Anthony, sorry. He's got a twin brother. Stan, Scholar Share, Tony, TCAC. Tony and Evan here to just talk a little bit about what they do, and then also walk us through a little bit about the PowerPoint. But then as we have speakers cards, we are going to have everybody speak. And if we run out of speakers cards, then we'll go back to the PowerPoint for those of you who have come for that. And again, really want to thank everyone for coming out today because your input is very, very important to us. Jovan.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. I think the endurance is wearing off. Folks are getting a little bit stir crazy on the last day. It's interesting. Today feels like the last, when you're in high school and you're the last week of your senior year and you're kind of showing up, and it feels very ceremonial that today does. And so with that, we're just glad to sort of end our tour in San Jose. Oftentimes there are visits to the Bay Area as relates to housing, but for some reason it seems like San Jose doesn't always get visited. And so it was a brilliant idea by the treasurer to make San Jose the last stop, and we're glad to be here, and definitely glad for the participation because it makes the conversations just so much more fuller when we have full rooms. And so just appreciate you all showing up on a Friday evening. But as the treasurer said, we're going to have a discussion today about some suggestions that have come through our office while she was running. After being sworn in, there have been people who we refer to as sort of our frequent flyers who engage our office on a regular basis as to relates what we should be doing and how we could be doing it better. And so we essentially said, well, here's your time to shine, submit your comments, we'll reconcile them, and then we'll put them out for conversation to the general public to get feedback. And so that's what you have before you today. The way we've compiled them are those comments that had the most frequency in terms of submittals. We include those in the PowerPoints. There were more, but we didn't include all of them just because of the length of the comments. And so with that, if we can go to our goal slide. As the treasurer mentioned, Governor Gavin Newsom in January, when he released the state budget, also talked about his goals for housing. So the 3.5 million houses that the treasurer refers to are the governor's goals that were rolled out a few months ago. The treasurer is standing shoulder to shoulder with the governor to support his vision. In doing so, she has layered on goals that are representative of her values that we're going to use as sort of guideposts as we talk about the regulations revision process. And so what you have before you are 6 goals that, again, are representative of the treasurer's value system. And then to the left of that, you'll see icons. And so what we tried to do is take this very weedy technical information and condense it in a way that hopefully does not gloss over many, but is understood enough for the conversation to be fruitful. And part of that was creating icons for just optical reasons. So as we go through the PowerPoint, you'll see various icons above the suggestions. Those icons, when highlighted, represent which of our goals they meet. And so briefly, what you'll see is, of course, the number one goal, housing production in the state. That's getting us to that goal that is more than quadrupling our annual production. Second, you'll see the goal of containing development costs, which we all know are growing exponentially, and in some areas make it very difficult, if at all, to develop anything. Thirdly, you'll see spurring new technology. With that goal, our desire is to provide incentives for the private sector to bring to the surface things that will help with production, but then also things that will help contain costs. Fourth, you see increasing opportunities for people of color and women in the development and investment space. One of the things we know is that when we look at the development community, it is not reflective of the California demographic as a whole, and we're hoping to change that reality. Fifth, you'll see empower individuals and communities to be part of the revitalization efforts happening in their communities. What essentially that is a proactive way to get at the gentrification issue. All of us are aware and are versed with gentrification, but one of the things that we believe in is talking about the problem is not a solution to the problem. And so we want to be very proactive in terms of how we're thinking about changes that we're making and then the impacts they have on communities, and then how build in those communities on the front end to be a part of those efforts that are happening. And then lastly, build wealth for all Californians. As the state's banker, I think it's our job to be thinking about the fiscal health of California and its residents. And so doing that, it's more than just financial literacy. It's looking at all of our products and services and figuring out how do we better market them and then grow them to do exactly what's listed on the board to ensure that no matter what zip code you may find yourself living in, you have opportunity at the American dream. And so those are our 6 goals. Again, they will be used to serve as guideposts for the conversation that we will have around regulations over the next 5 months. So with that, I'm going to transition into having our principal staff for TCAC and CDLAC introduce themselves, starting with Anthony, then going to Evan. And then we'll go back to Anthony to begin the conversation on the PowerPoint. If at any point during the PowerPoint presentation you have a question, comment, or concern, please submit a card, raise your hand, stop us, slow us down, even if it's pertaining to an acronym that you may not know, because it's important that we're all on the same page with this conversation, so we're all getting out of this conversation what we hope to get. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony so that we can begin the presentation.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Anthony Zito. I am the Deputy Director at TCAC. And TCAC is the administrator. We administer the low-income housing tax credits for the state of California. So that's both federal and state. So we allocate the credits typically to developers who end up being the general partner of a limited partnership. The credits are ultimately sold to an investor, and that limited who becomes 99.9% owner of that partnership. And then they construct the project using that equity. And once the project's completed, the tax forms are issued, and the investor can claim their credits. Our monitoring staff goes out and monitors the projects for 55 years for compliance with federal and state regulations. We record a regulatory agreement against the land, and so the project is held to the requirements of that regulatory agreement for 55 years. And I'm going to turn it over to Evan. We work closely with him on the 4% projects. He can talk about CDLAC.
Yeah, my name is Evan Cass. I'm the Senior Program Manager for the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. The beginning of every year, we set a ceiling for tax-exempt private activity bond allocation, which is a prescribed formula, per capita formula that is set every year. And then we allocate out projects, affordable housing projects and the like, for allocation out of that debt ceiling that we set over the year. So these are tax-exempt private activity bonds and often combined with the 4% program.
Okay, as stated before, these slides were published, I'd say, last week, I think, sometime last week. And we're not going to go into it in super detail. We're just going to kind of, we're going to just kind of just cover. We're not going to go into a lot of detail. There is a lot of detail on these slides, so hopefully you guys got a chance to look at it and can comment if you guys have any, comments to them. The first change that was suggested to TCAC has to do with 4% projects, and it's specific to the targeting requirements. TCAC and CDLAC both require 10% of the units be targeted at or below 50% of area median income. And then also, as a project applying under the average income set aside, they are required to maintain a 59% area median income average. And we were told that, you know, some of the projects, marginal projects, were just infeasible because of this requirement. So the proposed change was to remove the 10% at 50 requirement, and thereby, you know, all the units could be 60%. That essentially would increase the income that the project would take in, and thereby, you know, supporting more debt, conventional debt. Obviously, a con to this would be we would be losing affordability on that. The next few changes have to do with the tiebreaker. So the 9% tiebreaker. Just by way of reminder, the tiebreaker consists of two ratios. The first ratio being public funds or soft debt over total residential project costs. And then the second ratio being 1 minus the requested eligible basis over total residential costs. So essentially, it wants to maximize the public funds and soft funds in the project, and then also reduce the credit request so it could be spread around a little bit more among more projects. Some of the suggested changes have to do with the first ratio. We currently have a size factor multiplier that essentially would promote larger projects. So if you meet the requirements of that, you would currently get a boost to that first ratio. The suggested change was to amplify that even further, to promote even larger projects, so we can maximize, increase the amount of units produced. The second two changes have to do with the second ratio. Currently, the second ratio is divided by 3 to kind of dampen that effect, because I think originally when it was put in place, we thought it was affecting the overall score too much. So that's why we added the divide by 3. One of the suggested changes was to kind of bring that one back up a little bit, so that it's a little bit more meaningful in the calculation. So instead of dividing by 3, we would divide it by 2. And then the last change having to do with that second ratio has to do with projects that are requesting federal credits versus projects that are requesting federal and state credits. Typically, projects that are requesting state credits can voluntarily walk away from bases. Okay, essentially request less federal credit because they're getting the state credit. And by doing so, they are actually getting an advantage in the tiebreaker from those projects that just request federal credit. So essentially, this change would be putting those two type of projects at equal footing. Okay, the next changes have to do with a complete redesign of the tiebreaker. So we would not use the current tiebreaker anymore, and we would just redesign it with the main ratio being units produced over credits requested. Again, it has kind of the same logic in that it would be units produced would be the number that you want high, and then credits requested you'd want that low to get the higher score, right? Again, that would promote more units, and that would stretch the 9% credit among more projects. And then also to incorporate certain public benefits, we would add in some multipliers, which I think we haven't necessarily decided on yet, but that would be a conversation with the group to determine which ones we'd want to use and quantify what percentages would be the right ones. So, for example, we have one listed here for high opportunity areas, 10%, a 10% multiplier, because we want to promote projects in those areas. And then in addition to those factors, we also have addition and subtraction to the tiebreaker, which would deal with costs. So and it would be compared to the state average. So a project with higher costs in certain areas would would actually get a lower tiebreaker score. And then those projects with lower than average cost would receive a higher tiebreaker. Do we want to maybe jump into some? Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's. Okay.
All right. Okay, so we have speaker cards, and we want to make sure we get all the speakers who want to speak. So, and just to let you know, in this process, we are not stopping any of the projects that are currently in the pipeline. We encourage you to continue, and we ask you to let us know if there are processes and procedures in our office that is causing some sort of delay or backlog, because we're trying to fix those that we can more immediately. But you know, these regulation changes are really meant to be thoughtful, to make sure that we are not causing unnecessary harm to any of you, any of people who are going to live in these units, and we anticipate that they would be effective in 2021 and prospective. So don't panic, just keep going as you're going, and we are trying to fix, what we can internally. So, Doug Cheshire, sorry. And maybe, Noah, just to be respectful, like 2 minutes. If you go over and you're, finishing, that's fine. We're not gonna have a hard cutoff, but thank you very much, Doug.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Cheshire, and I'm a field representative for Carpenters Local 405 here in Santa Clara County. Today's housing shortage has impacted the middle and low wage earners throughout California, especially here in Santa Clara County. With housing prices that are out of touch and sky-high rents, the workforce throughout the state has been displaced. We need affordable housing here, and we need it now. Through the use of tax credits, we can provide the housing necessary, but that is still not enough. With these developments, we need to hold our developers accountable and to do the right thing, the responsible thing. Prevailing wage provides a livable wage with benefits for healthcare and retirement. The majority of residential builders don't get any of the three. Hence, workers commuting long distances. Gone are the days that residential carpenters could go to work and live here in this county. There's something wrong with that. With the implementation of an apprenticeship standard, there can be a pathway to a career that will provide the skilled tradesmen and women for tomorrow. So again, I ask you that to provide affordable housing and a livable wage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Amy Fishman. If you're comfortable, you can always come up here too if you want. It's up to you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Amy Fishman, the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, also known as NPH. We are deeply committed to these issues, and we applaud you for raising them. It is urgent that we need production. It is urgent that we find solutions to displacement. It is urgent that we grow our commitment and our results around racial equity. And it is urgent that we address fundamental issues of cost. We stand here ready to partner with you and to discuss concrete solutions about what will work. We're concerned that some of the solutions that have been proposed will have unintended consequences that will be severe and negative and raise major controversy. Number one, by disincentivizing development in high-cost areas, those are areas that are high cost where they need affordable housing development the most. So whether it's in a particular region or whether it's part of the statewide set-aside, it is urgent that we need to build permanent supportive housing to address homelessness. We need to build housing for low-income workers and reduce mega commutes. We need to address the environmental issues. All of it needs to land so that to have an overemphasis on cost are in the tiebreaker will have unintended consequences. We want to emphasize a focus on reducing cost where we think it will make a difference. We need to grow the workforce. I applaud the carpenters and other workers for being here. We need to incentivize more workers to get into that field. Prevailing wage and union wage should be available for all workers who need it. CEQA and cost delays, time delays of these projects, the barriers to develop, NIMBYism, there's many challenges, and we can look deeply at some of the state regulations around Title 24 and what we can do to meet our collective goals. But what we don't want to do is disincentivize the role of local contributions. So here in the Greater Bay Area, since 2015, local elected leaders, big city mayors and others have stepped up to put measures on the ballot, measures that needed supermajority votes to win. That is a beyond a landslide of voters saying, yes, we are committed to this issue because it's urgent. And what we've raised here in those 14 out of 17 measures that won was $2.5 billion of dedicated funding to affordable housing. Plus, if you annualize out 10 years, some of the annual measures, it's another $3 billion. If you add in LA, another high-cost coastal area, they raised $1.2 billion in the city in 2016 and $355 million a year in services to address the homeless crisis in 2018. We need to do more to incentivize that action and to create more resources so that we reach the goals of production and we reach the goals of sustaining the movement around building affordable housing and keeping people in their homes. So we pledge to work with you, and we want to work with you on where we think that the solutions are going to lead to the right outcomes. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Vernon Hills.
Hello everyone, my name is Vernon Hills and I'm here to speak on behalf of Life Steps, a social service provider that serves over 32,000 affordable homes in California. Thank you so much for supporting the forum today and listening to feedback. It warms our heart that the new leadership is so impassioned by building more housing units. Housing stability is the key to all lives living with dignity. The regulation currently for both the 4% and the 9% tax credit, which supports social services from our perspective, has become the beauty of our transformation. Together with for-profits, non-profits, government agencies, and social services, we have mastered the threat to breaking the cycle of poverty. We have a diverse population, where our average family is a female with 3 kids, and many of our properties serve our diversified cultures. Our summer reading program has 98% of our children prevented the summer slide and thus creating a national model of success for others to do the same. That's huge. We have developed a highly successful program for housing stabilization, where a social worker is on site helping residents who have issues that threaten their tenancy. We're proud to report that since 2001, we have had an 85% success rate at keeping people in homes so that they do not have the trauma of homelessness. Combine this with our financial education program, where 92% of our residents are still in housing, with only one $400 impact because of a 6-month financial education program designed to empower our residents. In 2018 alone, 794 of our residents who attended increased their savings account. Part of the housing stabilization program focuses on budgeting and helping residents learn skills to remove debt and building savings. Just in 2018, the residents who moved out of our communities, 12.5 of them bought homes. This literally changes the cycle of poverty by allowing to begin a builder equity. Also, resident services allow seniors to gracefully age in place while generating major cost savings to the government. Premature placements in skilled nursing facilities are avoided and remission into hospital emergencies rooms are prevented. To be clear, Life Steps alone, removing the 4% service amenities, threatens more than 25,000 units. We strongly advocate for keeping the service requirements for 4% bond deals for all Californians. Let's break the cycle of poverty by increasing housing units while ensuring longitudinal services continue. I'd like to close by saying how much we truly appreciate our partnerships and that together we can continue to work towards a greater good in keeping people housed and remain self-sufficient. This, of course, only works by the collaborative nature that California's regulatory agencies encourage by supporting all aspects of housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And if speakers are from the same organization, if you wouldn't repeat, but supplement something that hasn't been said, that would be very helpful. Okay, Evelyn Perdomo.
Hello, I'm Evelyn Perdomo. I'm a project manager at Satellite Affordable Housing Associates. And I want to say that we believe that the 4% and 9% program should prioritize projects that are close to jobs and transit and are in high-need areas so that we can reduce our impact on the environment. We have a project here in San Jose, in downtown San Jose, that meets these goals. It's an infill project. It's in a transit-rich area, and it's near a lot of jobs. At 87 units, the density is 232 units per acre. We received an ASIC award, and we also received nearly $12 million in funding from the city of San Jose, which was critical. As construction costs continue to increase, one way to avoid escalation is to build as soon as you can. Well, that's difficult to do when our state funding system is so fragmented, and it can take a really long time to get all the funding you need. But that's where local funds play a very important role. Without funding from the city of San Jose, our 226 Ballback project likely wouldn't be financially feasible at its current scale. Through local ballot measures, numerous Bay Area cities and counties have been able to support projects and make progress toward their housing goals. Local funding is important, and we should encourage cities to provide more local funding if we're going to set ambitious housing production goals and have a chance to meet them. Thank you.
Thank you. Rochelle Redola, followed by Charles Pick and Matt Huerta.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Redola, and right now I'm currently getting the FSS program, receiving case management services from Life Steps. I have learned that you're considering dropping the requirement that owners must provide social services to residents in some 4% low-income housing. I object. Here's what my Life Step case manager has done for me, is help me in my housing, and right now actually I'm going back to school. They're helping me with that. So please don't get rid of resident services in affordable housing. We need it to succeed in housing and life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. Charles Pick.
Thanks so much for doing this, holding these meetings. I know it's been a marathon for you guys. So I just want to get on the record and say that there are those of us who are in the trenches preserving this housing that really are very supportive of some of the changes that are proposed. We are supportive of keeping, frankly, the minimum construction requirements in check because of the financial challenges of accomplishing a successful rehabilitation or preservation project. I'm an architect myself. I've been involved with over 100 tax credit rehabs in California. And what's happened right now is sort of a perfect storm. We have the properties are transacting for very high prices, very inflated cap rates, well, low cap rates. And you have very high construction costs, of course, and we have some very important social elements to these programs that we're trying to incorporate, but I can tell you the reality of the situation is that in the last couple of years, we've had some projects that simply haven't had adequate funding to produce what I feel is a durable result, something that will easily last through the tax credit period. We're losing some details through the cracks, and I'm very worried about the portfolio. We need to have the tools to preserve these properties, much less build new ones and add to the stock. So we have to be supportive of some of these measures, even if they are compromises, and even if some of the stakeholders are, not thrilled about the outcome. This is the real deal. We have to preserve the housing stock as mission number one. So I would like to state again, we are supportive. There's a large number of us who strongly support some of these measures and believe that they will allow us to preserve this housing moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Matt Huerta, followed by Suleiman. Yeah, you got it right. Okay.
Good job. Thank you, Treasurer, for being here today. And I guess I'm just one of those people that think that in terms of affordable housing and addressing our biggest challenges essentially that we're facing, I think affordable housing is the social justice issue of today. And we do need big, bold changes. But we also need to make sure that as we make those big, bold changes, that we do it in a way that respects a lot of the groundwork that has been laid very carefully and skillfully and strategically for a long time. Affordable housing developers and advocates and elected officials, many others, have carefully crafted this very dynamic, very tough, very rigorous process that you're proposing to make fairly dramatic changes to. And so there is a shock to the system. There is a need to really do a deep look at that. And so at least a couple things that I'd like to point. And my affiliations, just so you know, I have about 20 years of experience doing this kind of work. I have several 4% and 9% deals under my belt. I'm a board member for Nonprofit Housing Association Northern California and a board member for the California Coalition for Rural Housing. And also I'm speaking on behalf of my client, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, representing Santa Cruz, San Benito, and Monterey counties. Just two major points. Cost is a major challenge. We totally agree. But something to consider, again, is that the LIHTC marketplace is $1 billion, okay, 2.6% of the $37.5 billion larger residential industry, construction industry. So it's a drop in the bucket in terms of that comparison. Something to bear in mind when we're trying to craft these very elaborate changes and temper our expectations. And I think that we should not lose sight of the fact that we need dramatic changes in streamlining the state's fragmented system for funding affordable housing. We also need to look at addressing the construction labor shortage that was mentioned earlier. We also need to look at CEQA abuses causing unwarranted delays, costly studies, and frivolous litigation. So those areas definitely require a lot more attention as well. The last piece I'll mention too that was touched upon earlier in terms of the incredible investment in voter-approved measures. There's also lots of other local funding measures, local initiatives, whether it be commercial linkage fees, carefully looking at the transiency-oriented occupancy taxes, things like that, where local governments bear a lot of responsibility for making sure that we craft locally designed, invested opportunities to redevelop and take a hard look at improving our neighborhoods. They should not be let off the hook either in terms of being incentivized to continue on that. And I'm afraid that the way things are looking and pushing down some of the affordability pieces here, pushing down some of the incentives to for local governments to take a hard look at what they're doing is the wrong direction. So I join that list of folks that have those concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And like you said, we're here because it's not working. And we at the State Treasurer's Office is looking internally at what's not working in our office. And so we are actually trying to make, efficiency changes to make sure that we are not part of the problem. So local government, we're also pushing them to be a little bit more efficient and effective. So Suleiman.
Thank you. And thank you once again. Very good pronunciation, by the way.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask permission from the body if it was okay if I work for Housing Rights Committee of San Francisco. I'm a public advocate in public housing. Today I actually brought 3 tenants with me.
Okay.
And just out of concern for them and they're feeling comfortable, I wanted to ask if it was okay if they all 3 went together, and I actually yielded my question to them.
Okay.
That's okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
All right. And to help set the context, I also am going to bring up Kara from the National Housing Law Project and show us up the context, and the
Okay.
tenants will go.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Yep, come on with me. Come on. Let's go. Thank you so much for accommodating us, and I can yield my time. I also signed up as a speaker.
Okay.
So why are we here? So I know that, with the rising cost of development, the affordable housing crisis, I think it's often difficult when you're in the business of creating housing to think also about the folks that are living in the housing. And this is not just a program of developing and building housing, but of housing people. And I want to show you an example of where the TCAC regulations may have fallen short, and provide some suggestions for maybe some improvement in the future. So I want to introduce you to these folks right here. They're all tenants in a building in Hayward, and it's a very strange situation at this building. It's called Leisure Terrace, and it was acquired, and I'm going to give you some of this info too. It was acquired, and it's a market rate building now, and even though it's a private property, it's providing a lot of low-income housing in this area. It's somewhat dilapidated, and the project is actually converting to LIHTC. They're going to be doing some rehabilitation. And as many of you know, even with the LIHTC subsidy, sometimes the rents, even at 50, 60% of the AMI, are too high for low-income residents. So as the effect of this rehab, a lot of these tenants are being displaced because they can't afford the rents even at the LIHTC, 50 or 60% of the AMI. Another issue is there are tenants in this building that have been here for a very long time that may or may not qualify under the LIHTC regulations because their incomes might fall a bit above the 60% of the AMI. And these are folks that have been living in this building for 10, 15, 20 years. There is a regulation, it's section 1322 H28, and I'll provide a copy of the regulation because I know I'm speaking pretty quickly. And as part of an application for a rehab, you actually have to submit a tenant relocation plan. And this is for plans that are rehabilitating or demolishing occupied housing. And the plan is supposed to have a plan to address economic displacement when a rent increase will occur above 5%, and also just where folks will be displaced. A relocation plan was done for this property, but it does not at all address the displacement of any of these tenants. The only thing that it does address is folks that are going to move out temporarily for the rehab. It has one sentence that just says a lot of folks might not be able to stay due to their incomes, and there's no discussion. And unfortunately, this application was approved, and I believe it was approved, with not the proper oversight, because these tenants are being displaced, and there really is no plan right now to assist them. And so I'm going to pass it over to them just to talk a bit from their experience, and I'll provide you a copy of the plan. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nelly Blanco. I live at Leisure Terrace. I lived there for 10 years. And in February, we got a notice posted in our door, an application to see if we would qualify for the now new low-income units. So we did apply. We turned in all of our paperwork, and it took them, I don't know, maybe a month or so to get back to us. And it was just a simple one-page letter saying you don't qualify, no numbers, no explanation, you're above what we're requiring. But nothing official, nothing in numbers, nothing just, and this is your 30 or 60-day notice. I'm just very concerned because I didn't know what to expect coming here today, but I'm hearing there are two groups. There's trying to generate work for construction, trying to generate housing for low-income families, but how about that group, like us and the majority of the tenants in that building? We don't make enough to pay any other rent outside where we are right now, but we make too much to stay where we are. So who is helping this group? Who's helping the ones that are in limbo? And nothing has been provided to us. No relocation costs, nothing. Okay. And the way that there's several other problems that are starting to develop while we wait for our 60-day notice. Construction is a problem. They have been working last night, they were there at 10 o'clock at night working on a roof. So I don't think this company is doing the right way, and we're here to express our opinion and see if who can help us. Where do we go to get that help?
My name is Gloria Garcia. I've been at Leisure Terrace 17 years. I'm retired. My husband doesn't make 3 times the amount of the rent, so we've been having a lot of trouble looking for somewhere to relocate. That noise that was coming up was the apartment above us. Although they gave us 60 days, to me, it seemed like they're harassing us. Just who works at 10 o'clock at night? I mean, you could hear the floors being torn up, so, and everybody, the whole neighborhood could hear this noise. And then after the 60 days that we were notified, they're gonna tell us that we're gonna get evicted. I don't know how that's gonna proceed, what we should do about it, because we have nowhere to go yet.
How many tenants are in your building?
Right now, how many's left, you mean? I don't know, to tell you the
left.
truth. I don't know how many's left.
So how many units are in
You
this?
know more about that one.
Okay.
60? Is this one of them?
A lot of the tenants have left because they were scared and due process. A lot of them probably were not screened correctly.
Tenants left. I'm sorry, my name is Nicole Caruso, and I also lived at Leisure Terrace. I used to be a manager there until a week ago when they terminated my position. There were 68 units, and tenants left like about 2 weeks after we had a town hall meeting when the company that bought the complex kind of scared them, acting kind of pushy, to scare the people to move out because you had to have a certain income. And a lot of people left. Right now, there are about 20 apartments, out of which they qualified only 4 apartments to stay. So 4 qualified according to the criteria. I'm one that I also have to leave because I was terminated from my position, and I was given 30 days notice to leave after living at Leisure Terrace for 39 years and working as a manager in there for 26 years. I don't know how legal it is. I'm trying to find out.
Okay.
I don't have anything in writing at all. Nothing, no paper, no nothing. As far as of this minute, I don't know if I will receive something in the mail when I'll go back home. But right now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where am I going, and I don't know if I can do it in 30 days. I was asking when I was terminated, how come you give me only 30 days when you know how hard it is to find a place in the Bay Area in 60 days? And she was telling me that they were doing me a favor that they gave me only 30 days. Because a company
All right,
wouldn't give me that.
We're going to look into this, so if this is one of our properties, then we will look into it. And Suleiman, is this your phone number that we can reach
Yeah, I can give that information right afterwards.
Okay.
And I'll give you the number of properties that Reliant actually owns and the number of units that were affected and the number of tenants that have been displaced.
Okay.
Which I think is around 200 as of right now.
Can we do that offline after, and then, yeah, we'll follow up. Okay, and was that Kara Broad?
Yeah.
That's you? Okay, good. All right, good, thank you. Helen Tong Ishikawa, followed by Mercedes Sullivan and Dara Schur.
Treasurer Ma, thank you for this moment that you can give us an opportunity to share with you. My name is Helen, and I work with Mid-Penn Housing Corporation. I'm a senior project manager. And I want to share about a permanent supportive housing project that we're working on right here in San Jose, just about 10 minutes from here. And really the work that we're doing to contain costs, because I think there's an assumption here that costs are out of control, and I just want to share kind of from the ground what we're doing to contain costs. So this is a partnership with a local church. Actually, we have someone here who's also representing the church. And we're using their underutilized land to build 100 units of permanent supportive housing. And as you know, homelessness in urban centers like San Jose is skyrocketing at record levels. In the city of San Jose, the last homeless count, we had over 6,000 homeless individuals. That was a 42% increase from the last homeless count. So one of the biggest challenges that we're having building permanent supportive housing in places like San Jose is the cost of construction. Though we're in the very early stages of design, we've already taken many steps to contain costs. We are currently zoned to be able to build up to 65 feet, but we're doing what it takes to build to 60 feet and to avoid man lifts during construction. Man lifts are hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this is one way that we're doing something early on to reduce costs. However, at the same time, we're doing what it takes to maximize units and make sure that we're having cost efficiencies in our buildings. We're working with the city to make sure that we reduce setbacks, reduce parking, in order to make sure we can get as many units as possible. We're also working on our first level parking garage now to make sure that we can naturally ventilate the garage. As many of you know, mechanically ventilating a garage costs another six-figure add to our budgets. So we're working on making sure that we're naturally ventilated. Harder choices that we've had to make include getting rid of balconies for our residents. It's, this affects our residents directly, but it is a cost savings. And so we have made that difficult decision. We're also reducing corridor widths to make sure that we cut down on costs. So in this climate of increasing costs, we are already incentivized to make these changes. We're even very early on, as we are now, we're making those hard decisions. We're working hard to maximize units. We don't think the changes in the tiebreaker will incentivize us further because we are already very incentivized. So I just want to share with you kind of on the ground what developers are doing already. We are with you. We are trying to do what it takes to decrease costs, even without upturn in the tiebreaker.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've actually been the most descriptive of some of the costs, because we have been doing this, saying, what are the costs, drivers, besides labor? I mean, there's got to be, others, and nobody's really described to us. So I appreciate you coming and
we
being very, very
could share more if you'd like.
You've been doing.
Thank you so much.
And I would actually ask, when this is done, to make sure I get your contact information so we can follow up next week.
Yes, absolutely.
We definitely appreciate, sounds like you're taking a leadership role, but what we are hoping to do is create some incentives for maybe best practices to be replicated, similar to what it sounds like you're already doing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Mercedes?
Hi, I'm a law clerk at the National Housing Law Project. And in addition to some of the obvious changes of needing tenant protections, for instance, for the people in Hayward who are living through rehabilitation, the state of California has power through its compliance manuals and the QAP to add extra tenant provisions, such as the admission policies. For instance, Alabama, Oregon, and Texas all have specific language discussing who can be admitted as a tenant, the reasons why, and it's clearly listed for both the tenants and the landlords. Additionally, some of these states also include specific language that is provided to the tenants for the reasons why they were admitted and the reasons why they aren't. Adding these policies can help tenants understand what they need in order to qualify for some of these housing units, as well as let them understand the reasons why they weren't. Additionally, some other states, 9 other states at least, have clear provisions regarding the VAWA protections. Those provisions tend to include an additional addendum, which is either highly recommended or required as part of their state compliance requirements. These addendums are great for tenants to understand their rights, to know that they are available, and for the landlords to be held accountable and to also understand those rights as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dara, sure, followed by Joe Lopez and Bianca Newman.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. Dara Scher, I'm litigation counsel with Disability Rights California. DRC has been a partner with TCAC from the very beginning of the disability protections and architectural standards that are in the regulations. We are here because we're very concerned about proposed cutbacks to disability access and because we're concerned about other proposed changes that will potentially impact the people who live in these properties, particularly reduction from 50% affordability to 6% affordability, which in real life is a huge difference for the people who can't find housing in these impossible markets. I just want to say that we're a little puzzled by the PowerPoint that keeps talking about initial suggestions received, because certainly nobody reached out to the disability low-income community to get suggestions from them. So I'm not sure where these suggestions came from, but I don't believe they came from the people who live in the property. And I know, for example, that last year we made a number of suggestions kind of along the lines of what was just made to improve some of the oversight of some of these properties. For example, TCAC keeps no records about which units are accessible, whether there are people with disabilities living in the accessible units, which they're supposed to, what the waiting lists are like for these accessible units, or any other information that would either ensure that people are doing their jobs or that you have information upon which to make decisions other than anecdotal. We were told last year that Mark was leaving. Sorry, we'll consider it next year. None of those suggestions are here today. So I just want to say we really appreciate and know you are firmly committed to affordable housing in a very difficult climate. We'd like to be part of that discussion. There are over 2.1 million California households with disabilities. They're among the worst case housing needs. There are over 2 million actually with an ambulatory disability. We know from the work we've done in LA that the waiting list for accessible units, LA didn't have any accessible units for many years. Under our settlement, they now have accessible units. The waiting list for those accessible units and the few buildings that have done them are really long. Reducing accessibility and affordability is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is who we're supposed to be serving. So we will submit some written comments. Is early next week all right to submit those?
Yeah. So our email's fiona.ma@sto.ca.gov, jovan.ag. We're all the same. So we would love, I haven't seen your comments. We started January 7th.
Right.
That's why we decided to go and hear for ourselves and to, make ourselves available and to hear directly from you. So
right. So we will submit written comments, but I just wanted to raise this on very short notice. I was unable to bring our many colleagues in the disability community and the people we serve, but
you've been represented at the other meetings as well. So.
Yeah, these are these proposals. You were very clear. You don't want to cause any harm. Some of these programs will cause a great deal of harm.
Great.
Thank you.
Love to hear from you. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, because we're going to be assembling a working group post this 10-city tour, and I think it'd be good to have a representative from the disability community or DRC specifically to really, again, because what we want to do is we want to be very focused on good policy and try to, as much as possible. We know the reality of it is that all of this is engulfed in politics, but we want, again, as much as possible, put politics in its appropriate place. Because if we are honest about the conversation, if the overall numbers of units are being suppressed or not happening, then a percentage means nothing, right? So what we want to be conscious about is the percentage for the sake of a percentage important, even if the overall number is decreasing. So if we keep a number at 50%, but only 100 units get built, right? Versus if we can lower the percentage, but get more units, you still are actually getting more hard units for people with disabilities. So I'm just saying something to think about as we go into this, because the research I've done just initially with some of the TCAC, we're getting less with more. So we're actually expending more tax credits for less units, which actually then means if you look at the percentage, you're actually not getting the aggregate number out of a higher percentage. So those are things that...
I would be very interested. We can certainly either participate or identify people to participate in a stakeholder group. We'd be very happy to do that. There was not, when we've previously asked for it, any good data on the accessible units or the waivers or anything else, so I don't know where the information's coming from. More affordable units that aren't accessible doesn't help our clients that really need a place where they can get in the door with their wheelchair, get into the shower without assistance, stay at home. It's far cheaper to build an accessible unit than to serve somebody in a nursing home.
Right.
So
absolutely, and we should be designing with that in mind, as some of us are going to live till 95.
Absolutely.
And, we should be thinking about that, and that's part of why we're here. Our timeline is a 55-year timeline. So how is our community going to look, right? And what are the needs and the programs and the services? So I'm very sensitive to that. I live with my parents, and my mom broke her hip, and it's just
it's a serious, housing where people can age in place.
Yep.
We've really appreciated in the past TCAC's leadership in this arena in the disability community, and we look forward to working with you further.
So we should connect next week.
Yeah.
Let's plan to connect next week.
Yes, I'll get you a letter next week.
All right.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dara. Joe Lopez.
How you doing? Thank you for coming to San Jose today. There's a lot of concerns and there's a lot of issues at hand. My name is Joe Lopez. I'm a proud union member out of the Carpenters Union in San Jose, Local 405. I just wanted to say I didn't go to college, and so I found an education through the Carpenters Apprenticeship Program. It helped me learn to do a skilled trade, and I'm grateful that I can make wages in this area and benefits to benefit my family and the cost of living here in San Jose. As a San Jose native, I've seen many changes, specifically the housing crisis with skyrocket rents and expensive cost of living. I've watched family and longtime friends move out of San Jose or become homeless because of these current conditions. We need affordable housing. Having the opportunity to become a homeowner should be available for everyone. Through Factory OS, which is a union factory that actually makes units affordable. It's Rad Urban is another one that we have that we're constantly getting units put out, so it's something to think about with developers. But the taxes we pay as American citizens are not enough to fix this housing crisis problem. So we desperately need tax credits for affordable housing projects in northern Santa Clara County. When we're talking about community benefit, we have to ask, are we picking the right developer? What incentives are we giving developers that are giving a path to higher learning for people who are not going to college, as myself? Regulations should put rules in place for developers to pick contractors that pay workers prevailing wage so the workers won't have to use housing subsidies. Prevailing wage provides a level of protection for all workers. The average residential construction worker makes a third less than their commercial counterparts. It's because there's no union representation in the multifamily or single-family homes area. So if a developer wants to pay 50 or 60% less than prevailing wage to his workers, do we really want to support that? I mean, I don't. I know if a contractor has a violation for wage theft or takes advantage of workers, I don't think they have a place in private or public works in California. So let's start supporting developers and contractors who truly invest in their communities, not simply profiting from them. Let us open up these educational opportunities Regulations should require developers to use contractor pre-qualifications and apprenticeship programs. The Carpenters Training Center in Morgan Hill has a little over 1,300 apprentices enrolled, and across Northern California, 6,200 apprentices are enrolled in that program. Every year, out of Morgan Hill alone, about 105 average graduate and become state certified journeymen. Now, these are the people, these skilled individuals I want developing our houses, building our houses in our cities. Implementing prevailing wage gives a protection level to all workers and gives them a voice. You can honestly look at them and say, you work 8 hours, you're gonna get paid hours with no exceptions. It's gonna take all of us to work together in order to make affordable housing a reality. If the state, city, developers, labor force, and community come together, we can make this happen responsibly and ensure that there will be affordable housing in San Jose for years to come.
Thank you. That
Thank
is my
you.
message. Thank you, Joe. Okay, Bianca Newman, followed by Nicole Caruso, Nayeli Blanco.
Firstly, thank you, Treasurer Ma, and your staff for your tireless efforts toward the improvement in the delivery of affordable housing. My name is Bianca Newman. I've worked in affordable housing for 15 years in government, in nonprofits, and in banking. I currently work for Mid-Penn Housing on their business development team. In my role on the business development team, it is my responsibility to identify projects and assist in initial feasibility. And trying to get projects to pencil, and trying to ensure that what is put together will be viable in 12 to 18 months when a project is ready to be entitled. In a market where costs are rising at a rate of 1% a month is a scary and daunting feat. As Helen mentioned, we have been doing everything we can to roll back our building standards in order to reduce cost. And it is a problem across all segments of construction. It's not just in affordable housing. It's a problem that is in no way caused or mitigated by the 9% tiebreaker structure. My husband is a contractor in San Francisco, and he has had difficulty finding and keeping skilled labor. The cost to live in job centers like the Bay Area makes it difficult for people working in construction trades to live where housing is most needed, which only further exacerbates the problem. Many people left the state during the Great Recession in the construction trades, and the workforce simply has not returned to those pre-recession levels. According to the Department of Labor and Statistics, California is among the top 5 states with a shortage of labor in the construction trades. De-emphasizing, none of this is affected or influenced by the current tiebreaker system, and certainly it does not incentivize smaller projects. If anything, larger projects are one saving grace at this time. We get economies of scale and we tend to get cost savings by building larger. De-emphasizing local funding in no way changes what is happening in the housing market and local funding is really what's been propelling affordable housing forward at this crucial time of need. It's local governments and local voters, especially in the Bay Area, that have stepped up to provide additional funding support to ensure that affordable housing is moving forward and continuing to be built. What would be most effective would be to work with the building trades and other invested parties to figure out what can be done to get the necessary workforce to return to California and to look at our building guidelines.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Nicole? Huh? Oh, you already did. Okay. Nayeli? All right, okay. Gloria? Okay. Lorena? Over here.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for holding this forum. My name's Lorena again. I'm here in support of my colleagues here, the construction workforce, which I'm very proud that they're here today. And, you know, one of the things that has been coming up is the challenges that we have ahead. Of course, there's a lot of parties involved, a lot of compromises to be done. But one thing is, you know, I'm here to represent the Carpenters Union members who live and work in this area in San Jose and in Santa Clara County overall. In addition to being builders of affordable housing, the carpenters union members have made thousands of phone calls and knocked on countless of doors advocating for ballot measures to raise billions of dollars in financing for affordable housing statewide. And I'm here to talk about 2 points that, I think we find an opportunity here to incorporate workforce development standards. One is no matter what the regulation changes are, we want to make sure that we should not incentivize developers to use contractors that pay our workers a rate that the workers themselves can't afford the homes that we're building. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we talk about how are we going to generate, the next generation of workforce development, the workers that are going to be building these homes, our buildings in general. And so we can incentivize that by asking developers or incorporating incentives for developers to require them to invest and utilize apprenticeships and create apprentices through these projects. So housing contractors desperately need more skilled workers, and skilled workers won't just materialize magically. Skilled workers and supervisors need to be, we need to have the pipeline for them to become, the next generation of workers. No programs can compare to joint labor management apprenticeships in developing the skilled workers and the well-rounded tradespeople who are most likely to become construction supervisors and contractors. So without a good workforce development pipeline in the industry, which has been in decline in decades, our workforce has been declining. We want to make sure that we utilize these incentives so that we can continue the pipeline of skilled workers. It is in our long-term interest in the state of California to take on the cost of workforce development today. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorena. Again, if things have already been said, just please, add to, but okay. Macy Leong. Darren Bobrowski, Cindy Ho.
Hi, my name is Macy Leong, and I represent Charities Housing here in San Jose, California. Thank you so much for being here, and we really appreciate the work and the effort that you have put into thinking through this and working with the community on addressing these issues. That's very critical and important. Us as an organization, Charities Housing, have been around for over 2 decades, and we work tirelessly with the public and private sectors to address affordable housing by building affordable housing that's new and providing services on site, as well as operating and management the properties ourselves in order to service folks in the high cost of living, especially in Santa Clara County. We understand the cost of construction, as well as the land constraint and the increasing wages that folks are facing. So we really don't want to see folks being displaced, because majority of our applicants, over 50%, some are 76%, are in the 30% AMI or lower in terms of folks who want to live in one of our developments. So we have to provide services that for folks sometimes who are at fixed income level who can't afford any more rent increases should there be a higher cost of construction. We also, on the construction and design side, work tirelessly to figure out how we can actually finance and provide a lower cost of construction to deliver more units in order to address the housing crisis, both on the local level as well as on the statewide level. And some of the methods we have looked at are modular housing constructions, or different methods of constructions built in place. And one of our projects, for instances, we can only save costs for 5% lower with modular housing construction compared to normal stick-built. But we have looked at different strategies and different methods in order to address that. In addition, we understand the regulatory constraints with both city and county and state levels. So we often partners with cities and local counties to find if there's a creative partnership for land supply partnerships or creative ground lease financing or different financing. And a lot of times you also find projects have a funding gap that we have to find sources in order to address the funding gap in order to build the housing and to provide services on a long-term basis without displacing residents to other cities that are not accessible toward jobs and transit centers. And we hope to continue working with the state to find solutions together and addressing the issues that we're facing.
Great, and if you can submit any, ideas or
Yes.
processes that you're using
That
would
would
be
be
very
great.
helpful.
Be happy to touch base
Okay,
after.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is that Macy? Darren? It's not on.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. As you mentioned, we do have a housing crisis. This housing crisis is going to take bold steps to address and compromise. We are very supportive of most of the changes you're proposing related to trying to increase project feasibility through leveraging and controlling project costs, whether that's through the 10% of 50 requirement, 59% average affordability, ADA, water usage, energy, other items like that. So we're very supportive of that. With this, we're going to have an issue with CDLAC bond allocation. As you know, we're looking at becoming competitive in that nature, and we need to take steps very quickly to try to conserve that bond cap as much as possible by limiting bond cap per project to 55 or 60% of the eligible basis. We should look at taxable tails, recycling bond cap, as well as working with HCD to potentially disperse their money during construction, which, as you probably know, it's only a permanent financing now. That would help with controlling project interest if you use that money. Also related to CDLAC is the current regulations actually are in contradiction to trying to in this as once you get competitive in the point scoring, it actually drives down your average affordability. So we need to look at the CDLAC point scoring and how that may not be aligned with what you're trying to achieve in order to leverage project cost. Regarding the 9% tiebreaker, we need to reward projects that efficiently use credits, whether that's through state subsidies, but also balancing it through cost efficiency. There needs to be a balance of doing it both ways. On item 8 in your PowerPoint presentation, something that I think we've touched upon previously with you is this retesting of the debt coverage ratio requirement. This is an urgent action that we really need to move forward and look forward to try to find a solution with you. It is not feasible for projects to try to requalify the debt coverage test at place in service. Right. And then finally, something that was put in place 3 or 4 years ago by CDLAC is language regarding transfer events. This is when you're going to refinance, re-syndicate, or sell a project. It requires you to go through quite a few hoops to satisfy this requirement. It takes a lot of staff time as well as developer time to satisfy this requirement. I don't think it actually preserves or increases the supply of affordable housing at all. It just takes a lot of time to satisfy it, and it's very complicated and convoluted. So I would ask that you look at that and look at eliminating the transfer event language. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We were just talking about that earlier. And then the 8609s, I guess, there's a backfill, so we're trying to figure out how to address those as well. Okay, thank you, Darren. Cindy? Followed by Sheridan and Valerie.
Hi, my name is Cindy Ho. I am a first period apprentice with the Carpenters Union. I am also a single mother of 6. The union has given me the opportunity to raise and support my children on my own and teach them that as long as you're willing to work hard, anything is achievable. And it would not be possible if it were not for apprenticeship programs like the one I am in today. Because of this program, I am able to earn while I learn and am on a way to a career that I am proud of. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Sheridan?
Thank you, Treasurer Ma, and thank you for doing these forums, these listening sessions, and bringing your leadership team. We really appreciate this. Sheridan Nigla with the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I'm here with my colleague David Grady, and between the two of us, we hear from 12 counties in California, our 2 regional offices do, about the affordable, inclusive, and accessible housing needs of Californians with disabilities. people with developmental disabilities as well as general disabilities, and wanted to echo some points that our colleagues at Disability Rights of California mentioned. This absolutely, most of the people that we hear from, many of you even have vouchers or have been in subsidized housing of some sort, but cannot find permanent supportive housing, have not been able to retain that, have to leave counties to look for other situations. And most of the people that we hear from are extremely low income. So low income is not sufficient for them and will not help them sustain housing there. I love hearing about the upcoming working group and want to encourage Deputy Agee to please reach out to the disability community. We have a lot of wonderful advocates and both professionals and self-advocates, people with disabilities that would love to sit in these working groups and be supportive of them and be able to ensure that people with disabilities are included. And I noticed on the revision goals on the first slide of your deck there, it talks about opportunities for women and people of color. We would love to see people with disabilities included as a primary goal for these revision activities. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you, and we were smiling because a prerequisite to be on the committee is to pronounce my last name right. My last name is AG, but
AG,
points well taken. And you
Deputy AG.
Yes, and your
Apologies to you.
organization has been present at every single working group, and we've actually had some one-on-one conversation with a few folks so far, so continue to stay engaged.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Valerie?
Hi, welcome to our area. We really appreciate your presence here and your very apparent interest. I'm here actually on an ABLE account issue. I'd like to thank you generally for your support of various forms of wealth accumulation, for parties for whom wealth is an elusive concept in reality. So I'm actually here as a parent to make a plea for some urgently needed guidance in CTCAC regulations that govern initial and annual tenant income recertifications. I'm pleading for this because individuals with disabilities are encountering difficulty in annual California LIHTC tenant recertifications, and I assume initial eligibilities possibly, with respect to the treatment of ABLE accounts. And this goes to both contributions, post-tax contributions by third parties to ABLE accounts, funds in an ABLE account, disbursements from an ABLE account, and growth of funds in ABLE accounts. Apartment managers conducting these reviews are completely at sea as to how to treat them, given kind of the lack of explicit guidance on ABLE accounts specifically.
Okay.
They're questioning whether third-party contributions to an account should be treated as income to a resident, whether growth of funds, if they're considering them as an asset, should be imputed as income. And this is a big departure from recently issued HUD regulations for which we've been waiting along with state treasurers for multiple years. We're glad that the guidance is so helpful. We're hoping that that guidance can be mirrored explicitly in LIHTC regulations. It's really urgently needed and it's impeding the funding of those accounts.
Okay, yeah, so CalAble just started this year, so it is a new program, and I recognize there's probably needed guidance, so we would love to work directly with you.
Yeah.
Since it seems like you're very familiar with what's going on, so it would be very helpful.
I'm an example of a person who really wants to fund an ABLE account and has been experiencing impediments, and I'm just really concerned at the passage of time. I also wanted to plea for much more concerted development of affordable housing for the lower end of extremely low income folks. I'm seeing this on a broad scale for people with developmental disabilities. I have multiple friends whose adult family members are at home. These parents are now, in some cases, in their 70s and 80s with individuals for whom they want to provide a supported transition before they themselves expire. and in some cases, some friends of mine have. I'd also like it recognized that housing at that level for folks with developmental disabilities may really require more than a studio space because of the need for a live-in aid.
Caregiver, yeah.
If it's possible to give you one more, if I can leave you with a question.
Okay.
What would your expectation be of tenant portion of rent relative to income for an extremely low income person? For example, on SSI, SSP, who is at an extremely low income tier, has a HUD Housing Choices voucher and is living in a LIHTC property geared to low income and very low income folks. I'll answer that. It can easily be 90% of their monthly income. They're falling through the cracks on these programs. There aren't enough 811 vouchers. Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, Nikki Beasley, Henry Fulmore, and Alyssa Dennis.
Good afternoon, Treasurer, and thank you for your time today. So my name is Nikki Beasley. I'm the Executive Director of Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services supporting Alameda Contra Costa County, and we actually are housed in the city of Richmond. We've been around since 1981. We're an affordable housing organization. We provide housing to low-income residents through rentals. I'm here for you in front of you today as an infill developer who has been advocating quite a bit in regards to affordable housing solutions as it relates to home ownership projects, because what we're finding, there's little or no resources for those type of projects. In cities like Richmond and Oakland, where there's still blight, where there's still empty lots, we feel we can make a positive impact. So we're asking, as you are evaluating the ways that your department can support, that there be a conversation about home ownership, because as it was said today, and to your goals, it will help empower the distressed communities, help build wealth, and we believe there's a place. And it's also important to know that this is the power of and in both, because it's a very dynamic situation to solve. So we wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Henry?
I'm gonna pass on mine. Okay. She answered and spoke about my question I was gonna ask you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Alyssa?
Thank you, sir. Hi, good afternoon. Alyssa Dennis with Community Economics. So we've been working with our clients, our nonprofit clients, on affordable housing LIHTC projects for about 30 years. So we've been through a lot of tiebreakers. And we've seen a lot of things happen with tiebreakers because they end up being the defining factor of how properties get built. So we had, for example, cost per unit. So we saw lots of really small units. Then we had a pendulum swing to basis per bedroom. So all of a sudden there were all these 4-bedroom units. And we had, what else did I write down here? We had, a moment when you get points for having market rate units. So we have properties that have like 2 market rate units for no other reason. And we've had, one of the major things we've had is cost issues. And when you have cost as the definitive factor, you see this race for the bottom, and you see cost cutting, which results in lower quality production. You see cost in operating cuts in operating costs result in less production. And I think that what we care about, what all of our clients and ourselves care about, is building quality. And I think that's what you and the folks in the Treasurer's Office and the folks who are running these programs also want to see is quality housing. So I think that there's a fine line between the cost efficiencies that everybody wants to achieve and everybody strives to achieve, and cost cutting that just leads to a reduction in quality. I was a little concerned about looking at on the PowerPoint presentation the set of goals, and I trust that those were goals for this discussion rather than the set of like your overall goals for the project. But I did want to offer, kind of taking a look at your goals, what I think that what I think that people have in mind, the nonprofit developers we work with have in mind as goals, and what I hope are kind of our shared goals and values for the program overall. And primarily, since folks are in it for the long term, at least 55-year regulatory agreement, if not longer, people want to see buildings they can be proud of, and their residents can be proud of, and the neighborhood can be proud of, and the electeds and the political electives can be proud of. So it's important, rather than just say increase production, we say increase production of safe, stable, well-constructed, and well-maintained affordable homes for our most vulnerable Californians, from the unsheltered to the working poor. That we say building in locations, designs, and densities appropriate for local communities. That we say balancing cost efficiencies with ensuring quality design and services that instill pride in both developers and residents, and pay construction workers a living wage. Use new technologies to the extent they can reduce costs. Empower residents by providing opportunities for movement to racially integrated neighborhoods while not abandoning our distressed communities make sure that appropriate services are available. Provide incentives for public investment in affordable housing that are seen as enhancing local economies and local communities. Incentivize developers with a consistent, understandable, transparent, and efficient process securing considering tax credits and state funds. So I would hope that we could kind of frame some of those as the framework for then having input from nonprofit developers, as Helen provided on specific kind of cost measures, but having sort of that shared values that are encompassing more than just issues of cost. Thank you.
Right. Carlos? Followed by Liz Gardner, David Lowe, Sarah White.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Castellanos. I'm also work for Mid-Penn Housing. I'm Director of Housing Development. And just to not cover everything that my colleagues have said, but definitely echoing other things that have been said here, is we're in it for the long haul. We've been as an organization and building affordable housing now for 49 years. 55 years is we're planning to go way beyond 55. And so when we look at our developments, as my two colleagues mentioned, we're looking at cost measures to keep costs down, also keep the quality up. We want to build very cost and quality housing. And those are things that sometimes we have to make tough decisions, as Helen mentioned. And so we would definitely, we understand and we look forward to being part of the conversation, like suggesting to look at some of the requirements that the state has, the TCAC has had, about around unit sizes and Title 24 electric vehicle requirements, storage and space requirements. Those are things that we need to talk about, without saying that the issue is cost and it's broken. I think it's more like, how can we improve on what has been already set in place? And so we look forward to that. We really appreciate the efforts that the staff have done over the last few years, and we know that they're strapped, and we hope that the proper resources will be there for staff to be able to process all these things as well. Thank you very much.
Right. So Jovan has very eloquently said in prior meetings that right now it is a crisis, and we can all feel in the room all the tensions, right? But just because we're not saying yes at this moment, it doesn't mean it can't be a yes next year or the year after. And so we are all in this for 55 years as well, but something has not been working over the last 10 years, and so that's why we're all here, and we all need to come together. So thank you, Carlos. Liz Gardner? Oh, sure. Sure.
My name is Liz Gardner, and I'm a grateful tenant of an affordable housing unit in Palo Alto. And I'm also the product of the down spiral of Proposition 13. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I wanted to talk today because there's been some really great points about design and cost efficiencies. My major question in my, I should say, novice study of this subject is why does it cost so much to house a California human being? What is, I guess, getting behind that? Let's say, as opposed to transferring a human being on a train or something like that. That's sort of an overarching question I have. But as I look at the news and I read articles about how awful it is almost to live here. I'm a single mom and I'm a head household with a family of 2. I live in a 700 square foot affordable housing unit, which my son unhappily says, when are we going to get the 3-bed mom? And I say to him, you know, I try not to say to him, but I say to other people that as a resident of California, I probably will not buy a property in this lifetime nor the next, and most likely not the next one either, because of the extraordinary costs. But there are some things on the horizon. One is revisiting the 1937 Housing Act and strengthening an amendment to combat economic discrimination. It seems like we've revisited it a few times over the last decades to address family size and to address racial disparities. So we really need to take a look at that. I also wanted, and I'm sorry I was late, I really appreciate Honorable Ma that you guys have made it so easy to get to some of these meetings. I live in the area, so I was able to come to this one, and I really, really appreciate that flexibility. But you know, looking at California in the last 45 years, I would say not only 10, because of what happened with Proposition 13 and how immediate that affected families that were low income at that time and could not afford to buy. So, you know, the generational poverty that has happened. So yeah, that's mostly it. I would like to address the idea of the smaller units, which is great, and the looking at, you know, getting off fossil fuels and the idea of having limited parking. We do need to replace these things with sustainable and doable mechanisms, like really providing good bike racks, things that will help people get to and from jobs, transit vouchers, not only on VTA or local bus services, but I'm talking trains that would get us back and forth across the Bay or other parts of California. So that, and also there's a code that parking spaces are based on, I believe it's unit size, is that right? Is it square footage? You know, maybe we should re-look at that and see if codes could be actually changed so that there's more flexibility in the parking. Let's say if a family has 1 car, but they have 5 members, or another member or another unit family would have 3 kids and 2 cars. You know, maybe there's some switching around that could happen on the properties themselves to make it more doable for busy families who lead busy lives. And just in closing, I am a low-wage worker, and I know the struggle.
Thank you. And what we found in our 10-city tour is one size does not fit all. Okay, so.
And I think to your point, I mean, just to answer your question, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase something that Jerry Brown said roughly probably about 11 years ago. And he said, Californians want everything, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it, right? And that was the beginning of a conversation where we were sitting at a $22 billion budget deficit. And so when we talk about this prioritization, this focus, this wanting to understand that we have to compartmentalize because we can't do everything in a moment of crisis if we're going to course correct. If we're going to course correct, we have to change behaviors that have led us to the crisis. And so I think the thing to think about is, you know, we hear a lot about what other states are doing, but on one hand, it's not fair to hold us to the same standard as another state when you look at what other states also aren't doing, right? Other states don't have prevailing wage. Other states are right to work. So when you say be like Texas, well, do you truly want to be like Texas, right? So, I mean, we sit in this conundrum where even in this room, amongst stakeholders, there are competing interests, right? And so you as the resident is feeling that, right? And so I think that we have to have that kind of conversation. That's what we're hoping to do in the working group, because again, we have to start separating the politics from the policy. We understand that people are paid advocates, that it's their job to hold their line, hold their position. But if we aren't honest about where we are, there won't be any housing anyway. For people with disability, people with low incomes, there won't be housing for anyone. And so we have to figure out how to alleviate that tension just a little bit so that developers can produce, so that irrespective of what percentage we land on, that percentage can be implemented because their production is there. So just something to think about, I think, that will guide our conversations as we truly begin to roll up our sleeves in the coming weeks.
Yeah, thank you. David Lowe, Sarah White, Jeffrey Morgan, Neil Saxby, Justine Marcus, Amanda Pyle. Those are my cards. So
good afternoon. Thank you for being here and giving us a chance to provide some input. My name is David Lowe. I'm speaking here on behalf of Destination Home. And Destination Home is a public-private partnership that's working to end homelessness here in our county. And clearly the production of more housing is a key strategy to that goal. And so I appreciate the comments just came out here too, because we know you guys have a tough job coming up and figure out how do we balance all these competing needs. And while I'd like to express or share our concerns that some of our affordable housing developers have shared too, we also just want to globally say that we think it's important that as we look to not only increase production, which is a goal we all share, that we also make sure that these deeply affordable units continue to get produced or more of them get produced. We know with homelessness on the rise throughout the states, we've all heard about it, that we really need those ELI units and VLI units to make sure we can get people off the street, back on their feet, as well as to prevent some of those families that are really just on the brink. So again, with some of those concerns, I hope that's something from a more macro level, we keep that goal in mind as you guys go through these revisions. Thank you.
great. And I do want to let you know that the governor signed a very, I think, responsible and compassionate budget. Yesterday, there's also a housing trailer bill that will be voted on shortly, containing $500 million for state housing tax credits in the 4% program, $650 million for homeless housing, $500 million to finance mixed income housing, $250 million for housing planning and production, and $500 million for infill infrastructure grants. So Governor Newsom is very committed. He set a high goal, but he's also putting his money where his mouth is, and it's incumbent on us, all of us, to figure out how to, create those regulations, get the money out, so that all of you can continue to build responsibly. So yes, Dave. Jeffrey.
I'm Jeff Morgan,
Okay.
Treasurer Ma, Deputy AG. Get that right? Okay, good. And Anthony, I've known you for years. We are just about to have a groundbreaking, and you're invited. We've housed over 150 formerly chronically homeless and ended probably about 1,000 years of homelessness between them. It probably will save $50,000 per person. In terms of services, that's about $7.5 million a year. I really appreciate some of the changes, and I do think change is important. I like the idea that you're looking at cost. Our project would not have been built had it not been modular housing. It's the first modular construction in the city of San Jose for affordable housing. We are very aggressive about those ideas, as many of us are as nonprofits. I think that there are some good measures, and we've reviewed the presentation in detail. I think there are also some things that can be improved or changed. We're a mid-sized nonprofit. The high cost factor, for example, calculating a disincentive for folks that are at higher costs, is based on an outdated and inaccurate measure called threshold basis, which essentially does not keep track of current costs, especially when they go up 20% a year. So when I'm looking at that, I think I'd like to see that particular measure is eliminated, because frankly, it's something that just makes it harder for me to do my mission, and it doesn't create one more unit of affordable housing. We're building in one of the highest cost areas in the state. Why is that? We're one of the economic engines that drives most of the wealth that comes into the state of California. This is a place that needs people. It needs jobs. I would say that in the overall goals, what I hope you'll consider is we're very environmentally sustainable. That's a part of our core values that you look at in terms of what's your return on investment. Look at the return on investment of reduction of greenhouse gases. Include that as one of your goals as well. When you're looking at it, look at the quality of life for people like a superintendent I've worked with for 15 years who's commuted 6 hours a day to and from Modesto. Let's build the housing where the jobs are. When we do that, we're able to continue to grow the economy. We're able to put people in places where they can be empowered. When we're thinking about overall goals, let's think about gentrification. We have many members of this community, many generations of, for example, Portuguese construction workers who have been forced out. We're seeing a lot of carpenters and others I know people who are renting rooms here at $1,400 a month. Why are they doing that? This is where the jobs are. We need to build the housing here. So what I would encourage is that we look at those factors as a part of the calculation of a return on investment. Think about the health measure. Think about a savings of $50,000 a person. If I build in a rural area, sometimes the rents aren't even enough to cover the operating costs if you're talking about the highest impact residents. So what I would say is if I'm working with permanent supportive housing, I can actually take advantage of the fact that we have higher market rate so that we can care for others with the costs from the operating costs covered by those other rents. So I appreciate the change. We are very much in support of trying to be as efficient as possible. Let's make it the smartest return on investment we can make it, not just straight dollars, but putting the housing where it's needed the most.
Thank you. Okay. Any of the other folks still want to speak? Sarah White, Neil Saxby, Justin Marcus, Amanda Pyle.
Hi, I'm Sarah White with TNDC. We're based in the Tenderloin neighborhood of San Francisco. Just want to say, totally agree with everything that gentleman just said, and Alyssa as well at CEI. I think raising really good points. We just feel, generally a little concerned about the emphasis on cost efficiency. I think there's a lot of intangibles and other things that I don't see being factored into that formula that is really concerning to me. So I think let's just really focus on making the policy work for the people that need the housing. So I'm glad to hear that this is just the first step of many, and I really do encourage you to widen that conversation circle to include people that will be living in the housing, people that are impacted by displacement, people that want to stay in their communities but can no longer afford to do that. I think that's really what we have to make sure that this program is working for them. And, in that widening of the conversation circle, just please do also talk with CHPC, CEI, MPH. They really understand the work that the nonprofit community is trying to do to help people stay in their communities, to support anti-displacement work and make sure that the program works for low-income folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here.
There it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Firstly, so my name is Neil Saxby. I'm a Director of Development with Bridge Housing, and I really wanted to applaud you for taking the time out of your busy days to listen to us and hopefully our positive feedback. So I've been working in affordable housing for 13 years, and I wanted to share some perspectives. I've worked for 3 developers, nonprofits. I think I've worked on about 15.9% applications, and across the Bay Area, it's fantastic to see how those tax credits, the likes of Anthony and the others, have been leveraged to build affordable housing. I've also seen a doubling of housing costs in that time. Across those 3 nonprofits, different approaches, different cultures, same diligent effort at reducing costs, avoiding having to value engineer the quality that we want for our people here, but ending up often having to make those difficult decisions. I did want to just point out that in none of the jurisdictions I've worked in have I ever seen anything but an interest to build more units for the same amount of resources. So very few jurisdictions have endless resources. You get capped at what you get from a local authority. We're up against trying to create more units always with the limited resources we have. So just wanted to address that. I'm not sure where that example is coming from, where some or maybe one developer has reduced the number of units to game the tiebreaker. I also wanted to address some of the ways that we try and reduce cost. I've worked for a nonprofit in the past that lost all its developer fee to try and go modular. The developer fee sustains our organizations. We try and get ahead of the game with limited resources to design the building before we get 9% tax credits, but that involves a lot of money out of the door. What I would recommend is that the 9% readiness, 180-day readiness is maybe relooked, because what I've seen is a scramble to get the design tight in those 180 days, and then you bid it out in a scramble to get the contract signed and close and readiness. And your contract is like, these plans are not well developed. We're going to throw a whole bunch of fluff at this in terms of price. That's no good. The other one is just maybe changing your application around so that we're not stuck in the middle of the winter when we actually build these buildings. That's just probably throwing a whole lot of money into the dirt. So thank you.
Yeah. So if instead of 180-day, what would you recommend?
Well,
Well, come with solutions. So then, because I mean, like.
well, we want the housing built as soon as possible. You want to hold us accountable, but gosh, I think another 2 months would help in that process of getting the plans baked and timed of value engineer, bring the cost down, just give us a little more time to think things through properly.
Got it. Yeah. And the application round, we heard that the 4%, people are ready, so we've been rolling the 4% as you're ready. We're going to hear it. We've also been trying to expedite all the appeals, so people know, hey, are they going to build or they're not going to build, right? Time is money, and so we understand. So thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi there. Yeah, my name's Justine Marcus. I'm the policy director with Enterprise Community Partners. Thanks so much for taking the time and being here to listen and talk with us. Enterprise is, working to tackle the housing crisis on the investment side. We do technical assistance to local jurisdictions and to developers around the Bay Area. We also work on the policy side, which is the work that I do. I want to commend the interest in cost efficiency, but really broaden the conversation, as other folks have mentioned. We have kind of a broader cost problem with real estate across the state, and we think that focusing on things like streamlining and CEQA and the labor shortage is really the key focus of those efforts, rather than kind of doubling down on the LIHTC properties to bear the burden of those escalating costs. We've also done a lot of work with local jurisdictions to help them step up to provide local resources for housing, and we want to make sure that that is not disincentivized through the new regulations, as well as we are about to get this great money from the state and wanting to make sure that there's consistency and transparency that's not going to make it even harder to get this money out the door. And finally, I just want to echo, we're about expanding resources and cost efficiency, but we're also about inclusive development, quality, and, really promoting economic and racial equity, which is what folks have talked about. We want to be incentivizing as much as possible folks who are in it for the long haul, permanent affordability, really focusing on folks who need the deepest levels of affordability, addressing the homelessness crisis, and specifically thinking about, as some of our partners are using these credits for preservation work, the real importance of quality developers who are thinking about working directly with tenants, about rehabilitation, and really about kind of what that commitment looks like and making sure that's incentivized through the new regulations. So looking forward to working together, and thanks for making the space.
Great. Thank you, Justine. And Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Pyle. I work for Golden Gate Regional Center, and I echo the appreciation shared for the time that you're taking to hear from the community. GGRC is one of 21 regional centers statewide, providing case management and coordinating services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Specifically, we support over 10,000 individuals in Marin, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties, all extremely high-cost areas. A little bit ago, you spoke to competing needs, but at times these competing needs can also be interdependent on each other. Lack of affordable housing threatens the developmental disability service system's ability to support individuals with developmental disabilities to live in their own communities. Specifically, I came to speak to the need for affordable, accessible housing for people who have extremely low income, which has already been mentioned several times. So what I'm also going to add to that is that we work in a system that is underfunded. Our service providers that pay direct support staff to be able to support individuals with developmental disabilities often are not able to pay wages that are high enough for those staff to be able to live in their own communities. A lot of times those staff are working 2 to 3 jobs and are still forced to move outside of the communities that they're living in. So affordable housing, in addition to being needed for people that are on extremely low income, is also needed for the staff that are supporting individuals in the community. Lastly, one of the things that I do at the Regional Center is oversee development of different types of services, one of which being single-family homes that can be used for group homes. We have seen an increase in cost from on the construction side of being able to do this, and I'm sitting here listening to everyone that's here and hearing like, most likely we're seeing that increase in cost because everybody who's doing that work is having to also move outside the area. So those are 3 very different perspectives, but they're all kind of interdependent in order for us to make our system work. So I just want to say that affordable, inclusive, accessible housing needs to be incentivized, increased, and made available in high-cost areas. And thank you for keeping people at the table who work with, at the work group, who can bring the perspective of people that are in the DD service system. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, knowing that it's Friday. So I know I got one more card. I'm more than happy to talk with Regina offline after, but I just want to have Jovan wrap it up.
All right, well, this was definitely the most robust conversation we've probably had over the course of the 10 cities, which again, as was stated earlier, it's a good thing. I mean, because in order for us to really, I think, get to the heart of what some of these systemic issues have been, it's going to take this sort of dialogue. But more important than the dialogue is really what's going to come next over the coming weeks, and that's really the sit down, roll up your sleeves, really analytic-based conversations and solutions that we have to have. And so, like I said to the DRC representative earlier, one of the things I did primarily when I came is I looked at the data, because that's the way my brain works, right? And I wanted to look and see where the trend lines were going. And one of the things that just amazed me is we're actually producing more tax credits, but we're actually getting less in return for it. So for me, that was just something that didn't make sense. CDLAC is another perfect example. State of New York has half the bond cap, but produces just as many houses. There's just something fundamentally wrong with that in terms of us just holding ourselves accountable, right? Before we even engage all of you. So that's the kind of approach we've been taking since January 7th, and we're gonna take that same approach with the stakeholders who come to the table. And again, we don't think we know it all. So Mid-Penn, we tremendously appreciate the conversation that you all have brought today. I think this is the first time we've probably heard of a developer who has really kind of walked us through at a high level in terms of what they're doing already to cut costs. So the reality of it is if we do anything to sort of shift in that direction, you're automatically going to be best positioned to take advantage of some of the things we're looking at doing. But again, everyone's not doing it. And that's one of the things we have to be honest about. There are developers that aren't doing what you're doing. And so who are they, right? How do we incentivize best practices? General contractors are the same thing. So if there are general contractors that aren't being labor friendly, we want to know that as well. We want to incentivize best practices with local government. We have local governments that we have visited that have asked us to provide incentives while they're sitting on public lands that are ripe to move, or are holding up developers permitting and entitlements, but are asking us for incentives. That's not good behavior in a moment of crisis. So again, unless we hear from you all as to what's happening, we can't put the necessary pressure on the system that we need to change the realities that we all are assuming today. And so with that, I want to go briefly into our next steps. As was stated, we have added on 2 additional steps beyond the traditional process that, for those of you who have been around, are accustomed to. So our January listening tour, and then this step was 2 additional front-end steps we wanted to add to, again, show that this is not just business as usual for us. We want to get out. We want to hear as much as possible. We want to visit diverse cities so we get regional representation just as much as developer scale representation. And so what we will begin now in the coming weeks is next week, my goal is to begin to assemble a team of diversity, not just diversity in race and gender, but diversity in geography. We're hearing a lot from rural communities, as well as distressed communities, just about how even more difficult it is to develop in those spaces. So if we think it's hard to develop in your downtown San Francisco's, your downtown San Jose's, imagine places like Lathrop, California, or Oildale, California, or Merced, right? Or even South LA. And so we have to be mindful of how do we help those markets where residents also live and where jobs hope to go. And so over the coming weeks, we'll assemble a team that will give us some insight into how we do that best. And then, as I said, we will approach the traditional timeline with hopefully closing this out in mid-October. Closing it out meaning, as part of the compartmentalization we talked about, how do we make the best next step forward? Not saying that we will close down the regs process for the remaining of her tenure in October, but what can we do to make the best first step possible and then give us some time to let the dust settle and then look at whatever additional changes need to be made. So that will occur mid-October at the board meetings of TCAC and CDLAC, where votes will take place on the TCAC side. Once the board votes, that finalizes the regs process. On the CDLAC side, it then has to go to the Office of Administrative Law, where it can take anywhere from January of next year to hopefully not May of next year to deliberate their process. And so we will be pushing sort of the governor's office and others to hopefully get the best outcome in terms of their finalization so we can begin to move forward. But again, as the treasurer said, whatever that timeline is, our goal is to do no harm. And so if that means we have to grandfather in projects, even if the January 1, 2021 date has a negative impact, we will do so. Because again, our goal is not to disadvantage anyone with the changes that we're making. So again, I just want to thank you all for your time and attentiveness this Friday. Look forward to more communications from us. Please spread the word. It is not our intention to not include anyone, but again, we sometimes are limited as well. So thank you. I want to turn it over to Treasurer Ma for closing remarks.
Yeah, and I just want to just talk about a couple of things that folks may not be aware of. In Governor Gavin Newsom's budget is free second-year community college for any first-time student. So I hope people will take advantage of that. Cal Savers is a new program administered by my office. So any employer who does not provide a pension plan to their employees, they will have to sign up their employees under our Cal Savers plan. It is similar to a Roth IRA that will be portable with the employee. We also funded our CalVet home loan program. I sold about $150 million in bonds. So if you are a veteran that was not dishonorably discharged, please look at the CalVet website. It is not based on FICO score and does provide down payment assistance as well as closing cost. And then Cal HFA also has home ownership programs. I know that that's been an issue for many people, how to move out of sometimes housing, affordable housing, into home ownership. So Cal HFA is also another resource for those who are ready to buy a home. And I want to thank Noah Starr, part of my outreach team, Tracy Jong, our student assistant at the front, and Greg and Artie for providing streamlining services for all 10 of our meetings. So again, we will be here after if you want to speak to us offline, but really appreciate you coming out on a Friday. As you can see, it is not going to be an easy process, but I feel like with everybody here in the room, hearing each other, understanding that it is not one size fits all and that there are many things that we need to consider, we are going to get to meeting these housing shortages. So again, thank you so much for coming out today.